Welcome everybody. Welcome to our latest Gary and Gary with some more updates and news. It's June and the weather's beautiful. Try to stay cool. It's supposed to be 99 tomorrow.
Wow.
So this is truly June. So as usual, let's start off with what's happening with COVID, because out there in the clinics you guys are fully aware it's still going. So let's look at our first slide. And these again are test positivities from the Sutter laboratory baselines. And perhaps we're going to see a little plateau here. I don't know, Gary, what do you think? It's a little glitch there.
I think we're very close to the plateau. If it's not now, it will be very soon, because we're seeing the rates go down in New York on the East Coast.
Okay.
And the East Coast usually has an earlier wave than we do. So we're seeing it on the East Coast. I think we're going to see it soon now. It's been tremendously busy. It's almost 20% of our swabs at the lab are positive.
I know.
Imagine what they are with all the home testing.
And what's happening in the hospital?
Yeah, the hospital is quiet. I actually had the first case in the ICU of someone with COVID, but I think they actually have bacterial pneumonia with COVID.
And I read that that's the majority of cases in the hospital, if not at least half of them across the nation, they incidentally have COVID.
That's correct, yeah. And we've seen a bump in our hospital cases because I think more people are coming into the hospital for other reasons with COVID.
Yeah.
And so our hospital rates are slightly up, and I think that's incidental.
Okay. Do you want to, let's cover this next thing. So I have heard questions from people in the clinics about return to work. There's so many people out there with COVID, and of course they're banging on your door saying, when can I go back to work? And so just wanted to cover that with Gary and I. And so this next slide talks about for the general public, and this has not changed. This is directly off the CDC website, and it's the policy they established. The policy they established, sorry about that.
That's Peter Valenzuela, you know.
Yeah, always does. So this is a policy they established back in December, and this is the non-testing policy, meaning once you test positive, you don't test again. So for the general public, this is what we're using, just stay home for 5 days. And after that, if your symptoms are improving and no fever for 24 hours, you can go out but continue to wear a mask for at least 5 more days. But the most important thing, and this is what patients are asking, they don't need to test again when you use this paradigm, because I know that confuses people, and they keep calling saying it's day 9, I'm still positive. So tell them that this is the policy we're following. It's right from the CDC guidelines. And the fact is that after day 5, the studies show that you might still have a positive test, but not be contagious.
Right, so people with mild illness, we know from a ways back, after 9 days, viral cultures were negative.
Yeah.
So really that's why the CDC said 10 days, because at 9 days, all cultures were negative. So for a mild illness, if people are testing again and they're still positive at day 12, they're likely dead virus.
Yeah.
And so patients are not considered contagious, even if their test is positive beyond 10 days for mild illness.
Okay.
Now, if someone's immunosuppressed, going through cancer chemotherapy, that's a different thing, because you can have a little bit more viral illness. But for 99.9% of the cases that people are getting in the clinic, it's an easy thing.
So don't let the patients confuse you. This is pretty straightforward. But Gary, now let's talk about healthcare workers.
So it's different for healthcare workers, and I'll tell you, at a leadership role, especially with our Office of General Counsel, this was a little bit different. So we have to follow, on the healthcare side, not the CDC guidelines, but the Cal OSHA guidelines. Cal OSHA guidelines are more stringent. And what Cal OSHA is saying, for the safety of workers and the safety of patients, you have to stay at home 10 days. It's not 5 days. If you want to shorten that, however, you can stay home for 5 days, and then if your test is negative 6 to 10 days, a home antigen test, you can come back to work.
Okay.
So Cal OSHA is a little bit different, and it's hard because physicians are thinking, all right, if I'm positive or my staff is positive, we do something a little bit different than what the information I give to patients. So that's why we developed the second slide for you. We're happy even to send out these slides if you want, to show that there's a slight difference in the CDC guidelines for the general public and Cal OSHA guidelines for healthcare workers.
Okay. So in effect, we're just following 2 separate sets of guidelines because we're required to.
Yeah, and it's a shame that they're not aligned, and there's been a lot of complaints that the CDC and CDPH, which are aligned, are not aligned with Cal OSHA, and that has its own politics.
Okay. Hopefully we've cleared that up for you. So Gary, you want to talk about the flu a little bit?
Yeah, so we've talked about we're going to talk about 3 things today. COVID, of course. I want to mention the flu because the flu is still going up. It may be a tick down just a hair, and this is as of May 28th, so we're hoping for June data very soon. This comes from CDPH. The red dots actually represent the flu season this year, and this is a wrong time to see flu go up, but it's happening on a seasonal basis, which is a little bit unusual. And I'll show you the next slide is going to be, this is Sutter data. And as you can see, the red bars represents what's happening, for example, in ERs. And so in the ER setting, we're seeing a lot of flu test positive, but in the ambulatory setting, which are the blue bars, it's not at the same prevalence. So we're seeing more influenza in the ER than we are in the clinic, which kind of makes sense because flu is a more severe illness. It's not the mild COVID illness that comes into the clinic, it's a more severe illness of abrupt onset of fevers, cough, headache, chills, that brings people into an ER or an urgent care, for example.
So the headline says, "Don't forget to treat influenza." Are you suggesting we do more testing ambulatory or not?
Well, I think if you think someone has classic flu, I would test them and treat them.
Okay.
And I think I would start their oseltamivir or Tamiflu even before the test comes back if it looks like the flu. But I'll show you one more slide.
Okay.
This next slide from CDPH shows you that there's a lot of viruses circulating. The green one at the very top is a rhinovirus, which is always around. And then if you look at the bottom, other viruses like adenovirus, parainfluenza virus, human coronavirus, metapneumovirus, they're all rising a little bit. And I think this is because people are coming indoors, they're going to movie theaters, they're going to restaurants. No one's really wearing a mask. The vast majority of people are not wearing masks. And I think we're seeing all respiratory viruses start to tick up a little bit. So you're gonna see this in your clinic. So if someone comes in with a cold, it may be COVID-19, it may be another virus, but if someone comes in with abrupt symptoms and it looks like the flu, it's probably gonna be influenza.
Yeah. Okay. There's a new vaccine out. You guys might have read about it in the newspapers, Novavax. And so we thought we'd just inform you a little bit where it fits in the schedule of others.
So Novavax we've been waiting for this for quite some time. We really wanted this about a year ago because we had the mRNA vaccines, we had the adenovirus platform vaccines that didn't really take off in the US, took off more in the UK. And we've been waiting for this protein subunit vaccine. So the company that makes Novavax is based out of Maryland. And they've been having trouble getting FDA, having enough robust information for the FDA to review their vaccine. So 40 other countries have this, Canada, Australia, the UK, the EU has this in Europe. And so we're kind of last to come onto this, but as of June 6th, the FDA just approved it under EUA. So Emergency Use Authorization approves Novavax. It's a 2-dose primary vaccine for adults over 18. So data for the booster and data for teenage kids is not going to go before the FDA for another week or two. So hopefully within the next month, we'll know if it gets approval as a 3rd dose booster vaccine. That will be very helpful because people who have got the mRNA vaccine and have had a lot of side effects or allergies, this is a good option to that. People who are vaccine hesitant because of the mRNA being a new platform, this is a good option. And very soon, hopefully it'll be an option for booster, but not yet. I put in some data here so people know kind of what the study shows. The phase 3 study before the FDA was about 25,000 people strong. Vaccine efficacy to prevent illness, so this is not just hospitalization, but this is any symptomatic illness, was 90%. That's really pretty good. It dropped a little bit in the older adult cohort in this to 78% for adults over 65. There is a potential safety signal. There's a little bit of myocarditis and pericarditis seen with this vaccine, similar to the mRNA vaccines. It's not higher, it's not lower, it's pretty rare, but there is a potential there, and we'll probably get more information on that when Novavax company presents the data for teenagers and for kids in the upcoming months.
So the real niche for this is that it's not an mRNA, it's not Johnson & Johnson, it's a more traditional manufacturing process for the vaccine.
Very right. It's a protein-based subunit. It's very similar to the hepatitis B vaccine.
Yeah.
So that's we're used to this vaccine. We know this vaccine. It's easy to have those talking points to your patients who are a little bit nervous about an mRNA vaccine. This is a very traditional way to make vaccine, and the efficacy looks great.
Good. We want to do a brief review too, so we're going to talk a little bit about monkeypox and give you an update. But if you're unfamiliar with monkeypox, the last video we did 2 weeks ago on May 25, we devoted a lot of time to monkeypox. And by the way, that was our 50th video, so there's a special surprise at the end you might not want to miss. But Gary, what's going on with monkeypox 2 weeks later?
Yeah, so I thought I'd just update everyone, so in case you're hearing about this, either in the news or from patients, as of June 6th, there's almost 1,000 cases, more than 900 cases worldwide in 29 different countries. So we're seeing human-to-human transmission outside of Africa, which you really haven't seen before with monkeypox. Most of the cases are in the UK, Spain, Portugal, Fourth on the list is Canada. We think that it really started to have transmission because of 2 rave parties, one in Spain and one in Belgium. And from those rave parties, there was a lot of physical contact, and cases started being transmitted. There's been 25 confirmed cases in the US, 6 in California. Most are very mild and self-limited, and there have been no fatalities with it so far. So that's the latest epi update. I wanted to give you a little bit of a contrast of the two because it's very important to see what's different between the classic monkeypox that we see in Africa versus the recent outbreak we're seeing in other parts of the world. Now, traditionally, we talked about this last time, incubation period 5 to 21 days. There's a flu-like prodrome, so patients classically get a fever, headache, myalgias, and prominent lymphadenopathy, mainly in the cervical area. The rash of monkeypox starts at day 1 to 3, typically, and it goes from a macule, a papule, a vesicle, a pustule to a crusted lesion. In a minute, I'll show you some photos of that. It starts on the face, often in the mouth, often on the face, then goes to the arms, then goes to the trunk, often on the palms and soles. It resolves in a couple weeks. If you have the West Africa clade, it's about a 1% mortality in Africa. If you have the Central Congo clade, which is a more virulent clade, it's about a 10% mortality in Africa. So that's in a third world setting without access to medical care. Now recently in the United States, and I'll put a red box around what we're seeing in the US, incubation period seems the same. However, the difference is sometimes there's mild flu-like symptoms or none whatsoever. So a lot of patients are not having that flu-like prodrome. The rash seems to still show up at 1 to 3 days, but very few lesions. So you don't get this body-wide pox appearance, only a couple lesions, and many of the lesions are particularly in the genital area. So no facial lesions, no truncal lesions, but some in the genital areas, and that's where this was first picked up in an STD clinic in Portugal. Very self-limited, no fatalities. I don't think there's been any hospitalizations for it. Let me show you a couple photos. So the next slide shows you on the left, the classic photo of monkeypox in endemic Africa. You see a lot of pox lesions, really a thick bullous. If this was a fair-skinned person, you would see a ring of erythema around the pox lesions. They're somewhat tender. On the right, you'll see kind of the more crusted form, but only a couple lesions, a couple on the hand here. But in most of the cases we've seen so far, they've been genital appearing lesions. And so a little different presentation and not having the florid lesions for monkeypox. So I think that we're going to probably learn a lot about this. The question, has the virus changed? Monkeypox is a DNA virus. It's a double-stranded DNA virus. And DNA viruses do not evolve like RNA viruses like the flu. So we're not going to be chasing this as we do the COVID-19 variants, alpha variant, delta variant, beta variant. Those RNA variants, those RNA viruses will mutate in time, but DNA viruses are much more evolutionarily stable. They don't have that antigenic drift, and they don't have the mutation rate. So we don't expect it to be more or less transmissible, but if anything, probably less.
So for our clinicians, what you're saying is we're not seeing this classic stuff. What we're seeing is minimal prodrome, mainly presenting with just a genital rash of these thick lesions.
Yeah, genital.
And to put it in context, I hear there's been like 2 cases in San Francisco, 1 in Sacramento, so there's not a lot of it out there.
Yeah, very sporadic. It's still mainly in men who have sex with men, gay men, bisexual men. That's been the predominant ones, but not only in that category of patients. And also you need special permission from public health to send off a lesion, to test it. So if you have any cases, just call me. Let me know if you have like someone, you think it's an STD, but you kind of wonder if someone's been traveling and they've had contact with someone, they're concerned about it, and then I'd be happy to help you, and then we'll have to call public health to get permission to test the isolate before we can just submit them a specimen.
Okay, great, thank you. Last slide is just another reminder about our HealthStream requirements that are due this summer, and I just wanted to remind you again that HealthStream is going to disappear. June 30th, it's going away because the foundation has adopted a new software program called Workday. We in the group side will have very little interaction with Workday. Really outside of that's going to become our new mode of educational courses. So on June 30th, HealthStream is going to stop. Any courses you have on HealthStream where you're only partially completed will be lost, so you don't want that to happen to you. And then we'll be getting information out to you about how to get onto Workday and find their learning module there, because that's what it's going to be. So I would encourage you, you're comfortable with HealthStream now, to try to get this done soon instead of having to learn a whole new model, but that's what it'll be if you wait till July. So go after it and get it.
That's
All right.
not far away. You
No.
know, it's right around the
It's a couple
corner.
weeks. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, hope this has been helpful once again. Stay safe.